One evening, between the years 1790 and 1800, a traveller dressed in women's clothes arrived at the Old Spittal Inn, the place where the mail coach changed horses, in High Spittal, on Bowes Moor. The traveller begged to stay all night, but had to go away so early in the morning that if a mouthful of food was set ready for breakfast, there was no need for the family should be disturbed by her departure. The people of the house, however, arranged that a servant maid should sit up till the stranger was out of the premises, and then went to bed themselves. The girl lay down for a nap on the long settle by the fire, but before she shut her eyes she took a good look at the traveller, who was sitting on the opposite side of the hearth, and espied a pair of men's trousers peeping out from under the gown. All inclination for sleep was now gone. However, with great self-command, she framed it, closed her eyes, and even began to snore. On this, the traveller got up, pulled out of his pocket a dead man's hand, fitted a candle to it, lighted the candle, and passed hand and candle several times before the servant girl's face, saying as he did so, "Let those who are asleep be asleep, and let those who are awake be awake." This done, he placed the light on the table, opened the outer door, went down 2 or 3 of the steps which led from the house to the road, and began to whistle for his companions. The girl, who had hitherto had presence of mind enough to remain perfectly quiet, now jumped up, rushed behind the ruffian, and pushed him down the steps. She then shut the door, locked it, and ran upstairs to try and wake the family, but without success. Calling, shouting, and shaking were alike in vain. The poor girl was in despair, for she heard the traveller and his comrades outside the house. So she ran down again, seized a bowl of skimmed milk, and threw it over the hand and candle, after which she went upstairs again and woke the sleepers without any difficulty. The landlord's son went to the window and asked the men outside what they wanted. They answered that if the dead man's hand were but given them, they would go away quietly and do no one any harm. This he refused and fired amongst them, and the shot must have taken effect, for in the morning stains of blood were traced to a considerable distance. These circumstances were related to my informant, Mr. Charles Westell, in the spring of 1861, by an old woman named Bella Parkin, who resided close to High Spittal, and was actually the daughter of the courageous servant girl. It is interesting to compare them with the following narrations, communicated to me by the Reverend S. Baring Gould. 2 magicians, having come to lodge in a public house with a view to robbing it, asked permission to pass the night by the fire, and obtained it. When the house was quiet, the servant girl, suspecting mischief, crept downstairs and looked through the keyhole. She saw the men open a sack and take out a dry, withered hand. They anointed the fingers with some ointment and lighted them. Each finger flamed, but the thumb they could not light. That was because one of the household was not asleep. The girl hastened to her master, but found it impossible to arouse him. She tried every other sleeper, but could not break the charmed sleep. At last, stealing down into the kitchen while the thieves were busy over her master's strong box, she secured the band, blew out the flames, and at once the household was aroused. But the next story bears a closer resemblance to the Stainsmore narrative. One dark night, when all was shut up, there came a tap at the door of a lone inn in the middle of barren moor. The door was opened, and there stood, without, shivering and shaking, a poor beggar, his rags soaked with rain, and his hands white with cold. He begged for lodgings, and it was cheerfully granted him. There was not a spare bed in the house, but he could lie on the mat before the kitchen fire, and welcome. So this was settled, and everyone in the house went to bed except the cook, who from the back kitchen could see into the large room through a pane of glass let into the door. She watched the beggar and saw him, as soon as he was left alone, draw himself up from the floor, seat himself at the table, extract from his pocket a brown withered human hand, and set it upright in the candlestick. He then anointed the fingers, and applying a match to them, they began to flame. Filled with horror, the cook rushed up the back stairs and endeavoured to arouse her master and the men of the house, but all was in vain. They slept a charmed sleep, so in despair she hastened down again and placed herself at the post of observation. She saw the fingers of the hand flaming, but the thumb remained unlighted, because one inmate of the house was awake. The beggar was busy collecting the valuables around him into a large sack, and having taken all he cared for in the large room, he entered another. On this, the woman ran in, and seizing the light tried to extinguish the flames, but this was not so easy. She blew at them, but they burnt on as before. She poured the dregs of a beer jug over them, but they blazed up the brighter. As a last resource, she caught up a jug of milk and dashed it over the 4 lambent flames, and they died out at once. Tittering a loud cry, she rushed to the door of the apartment the beggar had entered and locked it. The whole family was aroused, and the thief easily secured and hanged. This tale is told in Northumberland.